there's usually a common theme in this series. The tank in question is both heavily criticized and praised, and I attempt to find out which side is correct. More often than not, both sides are wrong, and the vehicle is just sort of okay. For the Soviet KV-1 heavy tank, I don't think the same can be said. It seems that most people think very highly of it, despite its very troubled development and service life. I guess it shouldn't be all that surprising, since the KV-1 is overshadowed by tanks like the Tiger. Anyway, let's take a look at just how bad the KV-1 actually was. The KV-1's story starts in 1937, when the multi-turreted T-35 was still the main Soviet heavy tank. It was realized that it lacked both firepower and protection. A project was started to nearly double the armor, bringing it from 40 to 75 millimeters. It was quickly discovered that such a project simply wasn't practical, as it would have made the tank impossible to field. An entirely new heavy tank was needed, so two design bureaus went head-to-head to design one. These bureaus were SKB-1 and SKB-2, who made the T-100 and SMK respectively. After prototypes were built and shown off, it was clear that having three turrets simply wasn't practical. By removing a turret, they could reduce the vehicle's length, decreasing weight and adding more armor. While designing the SMK, SKB-2 was working on another heavy tank. This new tank would have a single turret, combining both the 76 and 45 into a single mount. This allowed for more weight reduction, and therefore even more armor. It was designated KV, after Defense Secretary Klement Voroshilov. On August 31st, 1939, the first KV prototype was given a test drive. There were problems immediately. The transmission and V2 diesel engine were heavily troubled, and the turret was way too cramped to use the weapons effectively. The prototype was improved a bit and subjected to more trials, but the engine and transmission continued to cause issues. After it was decided that the SMK, T-100, and KV would undergo live fire trials in Finland, the turret was revised to only house a 76 and coax machine gun. When they finally did get into combat, the results weren't exactly inspiring. The tanks could take plenty of hits, but they were severely unreliable, limiting their combat effectiveness. There was one silver lining though. The test showed the KV was best out of all of them. It was far lighter, better protected, and easier to operate. Unfortunately, the KV would start production in January of 1940, not even a month after its combat debut. At this point, it was finally designated KV-1. Rather unexpectedly, production KV-1s immediately began suffering from a plethora of problems, of which the transmission was by far the greatest. The KV-1 used an outdated American tractor design. Being significantly overtaxed, the transmission hampered both speed and readiness rates. As the KV-1 became heavier and heavier, the transmission issues became worse. The engine also broke down with alarming regularity. Much like early T-34s, poorly designed air filters were the main cause. In US tests, the KV-1's engine life was actually worse, lasting only 66 hours on average. As for the suspension and running gear, they found it difficult to cope with the vehicle's weight. When extra armor was added with the KV-1E, it was discovered that the additional weight often broke the road wheels. This was partially fixed later on. From an operational standpoint, the KV was a bit of a drag. It was far too slow to keep up with the T-34, was too heavy to cross many bridges, couldn't snorkel, and of course, they ate through the few spare parts that were available. Its armor was incredibly tough, nearly impenetrable for most German tanks, though they could disable it without having to. The KV had a large turret ring gap, allowing shells to slip in and jam it. Nevertheless, German tank crews began to fear the KV. The crew were none too comfortable either. Despite having a third man in the turret, he didn't function as a loader. The commander had to load the gun and direct the rest of the crew. There was no turret basket, and no way to easily discard spent casings. The driver's vision devices were often poorly made, and very difficult to see through. In an effort to correct the KV, a new variant called the KV-1S was developed. Except for on the upper front plate, the whole armor was shaved down everywhere, which helped to reduce the weight by a few tons. Other improvements include new road wheels, a new transmission, new clutch, and a cast turret that was flush with the whole roof. Generally speaking, the KV-1S was successful. It did improve reliability quite a bit, and the new turret prevented shot traps. It wasn't without issues though. The new road wheels still broke. The new transmission, though sound in design, was often rushed during production. And finally, though the turret eliminated the shot trap, it was also a fair bit smaller, compounding discomfort. The commander's position was fixed, but there wasn't a hatch in the cupola, so escaping the turret was quite a challenge. Its success didn't last long, as the IS-2 replaced it not long after. In summary, the KV-1 was a pretty bad tank. It had one redeeming quality, and that was its armor. Even that was short-lived. It was only improved towards the end of its life, and it didn't have a huge impact on the war. That pretty much wraps everything up. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one.